Welcome to the fifth edition of the Shireburn podcast, the place where we talk everything building happy and efficient workplaces. Today I have Vanessa Camenzuli with me, who is an employer brand consultant. Thank you, Van, for being with me today, and really excited to have this conversation all about brand values because it's something that I'm very passionate and believe in a lot. I thought maybe we could start our conversation today by just a little bit of the diagnosis of the state of affairs. There's obviously been a lot of changes within the HR space and the employer brand, our understanding of the employer brand. So how far along the journey are we? And maybe you can explain even a little bit deeper, those who don't know, what the changes in the industry are that we're experiencing.
Yeah, thanks, Yas. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here today. So, yes, value seems to be, together with employer branding, a little bit of a buzz thing, right, at the moment. There's been quite a drive in recent years to actually talk about values, to have values, and to maybe understand what do we do with these values. So I think I need to start a little bit from that point. So why would an organization decide to develop, let's say, a mission, vision, and values? The main thing is to differentiate themselves. Okay, so when we speak about values, we're not just speaking to differentiate yourself as an employer and to have a particular culture, let's say, but also to differentiate yourself to the consumer. Now, when we think of a market like Malta, right, businesses through the years have been very much built on relationships, very much built on if you are happy with a product or a service, you tend to stay with it. So perhaps the idea of differentiation and the idea of really using your values to make your decisions, differentiate yourself, strategize, grow your business, hasn't really been there because the consumer hasn't kind of forced us to be different. Let's say the competition around isn't as strong as it would be in other countries. So whilst passionately I get quite upset that we aren't using values to the max, I am also very compassionate and understanding of the market that we are in.
Yeah. Would you say, because it feels like it's also a move internationally as well, that sort of younger generations care more about what companies stand for than maybe we did even just a decade or two ago?
Yes, that is an extremely important factor that comes into this. I'm not sure locally we, let's say, leaders have really assimilated this aspect,
the importance of it,
and that the young generation are really considering this aspect of what the organization stands for, but it is definitely there. The younger generation is much more intentional about their career. You know, I work with a lot of organizations that their leaders have been there for 20, 25, 30 years, right? There is no idea of change, like no concept of, is this company developing me in the best way possible? Have I become the best, lawyer that I could be, for example? Whereas the younger generation is constantly reflecting on, okay, if I'm giving this much, what am I getting? Right? Or actually, this company, what is it doing for, climate change, or what is it doing for other things? So this is a new reality that we need to face. And just like the younger generation employees are more intentional with their careers, so are the consumers, the young consumers, where just because daddy and mommy bought from this place doesn't mean that they are going to do so.
Yeah, so what you're saying is basically both from a consumer and an employer standpoint, companies need to do a better job because the younger generation are changing in their needs and their wants.
Yes. This is it. It's not a nice to have. it's a need to have. And we can't, yes, Malta at times tends to be a little bit, we adopt certain trends later, let's say. So the work that we're doing now is not for now, but it's for 5-10 years' time. Like, how are we making our organization sustainable?
Yeah. I have to say, I mean, this has been my experience as a consumer. The way that I relate to brands is probably quite different to the way that my parents relate to them. I remember recently when Amazon had a scandal in the US where the scandal was around the time that their employees had to take breaks, and they had certain delivery people in their warehouses who didn't even have enough time to go to the bathroom, and they were peeing in bottles. And I remember after that, I was like, I am not buying from Amazon again. So obviously these kind of, this is the employer brand. Like, as a consumer, I don't want to buy from a place which is treating its workers in a poor way.
Completely.
So when it comes to Malta, like, obviously you've already sort of touched on the fact that we're a little bit behind, but where are we?
Yeah, I would say that we're at the point that there is a desire to have these, let's say, values on a piece of paper. There is that desire, right? And I can see it even within, let's say, the HR consultancy community, that there is more awareness and more drive to support organizations in defining who they are through their values.
Yeah.
So that is a very good step. But then we come to what do we do with them? Right? Because we tend to get to the point where they might be on the walls. That's 100%. That's like number one.
Easiest part.
Number one, they're on the walls. We might do a very nice video for our social media. And then I go and work with an organization. I ask them, what are your values? And everyone's looking at me blank face. From the person that's been there 30 years to the person that's been there a month. So clearly, there's a massive gap there, right? There's a massive, massive gap. And more importantly, a massive lost opportunity.
Yeah.
This is what pains me when I'm working with organization. It pains me. Mm-hmm. Because we want to, somehow I feel, at least from my, experiences, that we are scared to be different. And values are forcing you to be different.
I'd love to tease open this one a little bit. Let's go a bit philosophical, because obviously there are certain values that we have as human beings that I think are very innate towards us, right? Like trust, honesty, whatever a company's values may be. But sometimes those values do conflict with the profit motive or with the company having its best ever P&L performance. So what I sense as a leader is that sometimes it's difficult to uphold these. Yes. So it's almost easier to sort of keep them on the paper. They look nice, but the reality of decision making and of sometimes having to prioritize the long term because this matches our values, it's actually very challenging on the ground. So how do you see that? Is this conflict inevitable, or can we do better to actually make sure that there isn't so much of a conflict?
Yeah, this is a great perspective. And I actually just had a workshop yesterday with a couple of senior leaders who were exactly explaining this situation. And my reply to them was, it is not all or nothing. Values, like behaviors, are on a continuum. Right? But if you are saying that integrity is your value and you are zero integrity all the time, then you can't do that, right? An organization, like a human being, is alive, right? And there are different times, there are markets that influence us.
Good days and bad days.
100%. We are not, like, for example, I consider myself quite a positive individual. Am I positive every single day? Of course not. So why would we expect the same for an organization?
We're not very good at that as human beings, like living in the gray.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's a really nice perspective because obviously it's a lot more approachable for leaders of organizations to say, okay, I'm going to implement these values. We're really going to try and aim towards them. Doesn't mean that we need to be perfect and live up to them every time. Of course, there is a trade-off, right? That then it can easily become a RIA and an excuse. But we need to find that middle ground, which for me is authenticity, where we're really sort of authentically trying our best.
I speak a lot, and there is quite a big movement now in the values kind of scene, if we want to call it that you are working more with behaviors than you are with values. So even coming up with, for example, a word like integrity, it's maybe better to come up with an action.
How can we notice we're
exactly. And with one company that I was working with, I think the value was embracing change or something of the sort. And the person, one of the leaders, turned to me and said, but if you're not a person that likes change, we can't expect all the leaders to like change. And my reply was, of course not. But if we're saying that one of your core values is embrace change, and you have a senior leader that every single time cannot deal with change and is actually kind of rejecting it and actively kind of going against this change, then is this leader meant to be a senior leader in this organization? Truthfully. Right? So it comes back to that continuum. We're not expecting, when we're talking about values, create a leadership culture.
The thing is, obviously, like we're now in 2024 trying to set values, but the reality is that people have been promoted into leadership positions for various reasons, most of them technical more than sort of soft skills or values based, for decades. So it takes a lot of patience and support. I always believe in giving people a chance to adapt and give them the support, to get there. But it is a challenge when, the CEO or the management team say, okay, these are our values, but we have different people within the organization
But that is also where the problem lies. As the CEO should not come and say, these are our values. Mm-hmm. When you create the values for the organization, just like when you create the vision and the mission, they need to be in that sweet spot between where the company is and where the company could be. They need to be aspirational, but not in the language. This is it. So, for example, again, I can only talk about obviously the work that I do, but using the language that the employees give you to come up with the values is already going to position you in a better place for when you come to your performance management and you're assessing not only what has been achieved, but how it's been achieved against the values, because they've all created the language around the values with you, right? Whereas if I come in and say, this is where we want to be as an organization, this is my vision, and these are the values, then you've already created. Language is a very powerful tool.
Yeah.
And for me, it might be forward thinking, and for you, it might be innovation.
Yeah.
But we need to find the language of our organization. The worst thing we can have is that I'm talking about forward thinking and you're using the word innovation, and we're both in the C-suite team.
Yeah. I think this is such a great point, because I think we do see this a lot, that values are set top down and then they're not kind of in sync with the core heart of the organization, and then it almost comes across worse. It's reminding me of the sort of issues that we had with greenwashing, where like people were just sort of slapping on these sort of we're green, and sort of the reality of the organization or the product wasn't living up to those standards, and then it breaks trust with the end user or the consumer, and you're actually worse than if you hadn't set a value in the first place.
Look, there's always going to be an element that the values need to serve where the company is going. That is always. The values are not only for employees. The values are also for your consumers and for your shareholders, if there are shareholders. So for all your partners, for your suppliers.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not to say that the values You know, you don't go to the employees and say, what do you think our value should be? And that's, boom, the exercise. It's much more intricate than that. But it cannot be too far away, because if it's too far away, then you are forcing something into the organization that isn't.
Yeah.
That simply isn't.
Yeah. Going back to that example though of the senior leader, because let's say a company they consult all their stakeholders, they come up with a set of values. You might still have a senior leader that is totally out of step with those values. So how would a company deal with a situation like that? Because I'm sure that happens quite a lot.
Yeah.
And it's very challenging because they might have a lot of respect within you. They might be great contributors in their own way to the organization, but be out of sync with sort of the vision and the values that the company wants to be modeled by their leaders.
Well, the truth is, one conversation at a time. That's how I see it. You know, it's tackled with one conversation at a time. But the strong brands will build their leaders to connect with the organization. You see, we want to create a leader of organization X, a leader of organization Y, not a leader. And that is why a brand is much more than a logo or a color, because you need your leaders in particular to embody that connection with the organization. And if the values are so kind of, let's say, at least opposing, even if the language, let's say, not exactly the same, then how is that you are diluting your power as an organization? If you have your leaders who are with you in the same space, but facing in different directions or not using the same language, you've diluted your competitive advantage, because that means that when I meet person X at a social event and you have a vacancy, person X is talking about the company in one way, and the other person is talking about the company in another. So you've just diluted the power of brand.
I think also if I could add, like the younger generation have, trying to say this in a polite way, I don't want to say like a bullshit meter, I don't know if I can say that, but where we're very sensitive to inauthenticity. I think we, as a generation, have been so flooded with advertising and with marketing message. We've so been around the block and heard all of these messages, authentic and inauthentic, the greenwashing and the real messages, that our tolerance to feeling like there is a misalignment in messaging makes us really feel like we can't trust this brand. And I think we underestimate this as leaders of organizations, especially locally, of how important it is to not take your audience for granted and not feel like you can PR and message your way past what the authentic situation is.
This is why the fancy videos of the billiard tables alone will not work to attract talent, right? You need that in that interview and in all your external touch points, so social media, career fairs, whatever they are, you have a sentence or two that is the truth. And it's not using nice language written by the best content writer, but it's just two people speaking. You know, I was at a conference last week, and there was this great videographer talking about employer branding content. And he said something which, oh my God, like totally resonated. This is not a movie. This is real life. You know, we are asking people to make a decision about their job. You know, this is serious. Like, you need to tell people the truth.
It's a bit counterintuitive in the corporate world. We're not very good at really believing that the truth is a good long-term strategy.
Exactly. But it is, because we need to give autonomy to the person to decide. If there is a high workload, there are people who thrive in a high workload. There are people who are, well, me included, so demotivated when there is nothing to do, or when the work is boring, or when things don't change. So when you've just omitted that part of your story as an organization, you have omitted finding that person who can actually thrive in your organization. But if you're trying to put on this perfect kind of story, I mean, every company is dysfunctional, just like a family, right? But it's about being aware.
It's about choosing your dysfunction appropriately.
Yes, and because it depends on where you are in your life. And it's like we want to take this away from the person. Like going back to that leader who is, really opposing these values. Maybe this person has moved on from the organization and they need to move on, and this is important and healthy.
You're reminding me of Brené Brown's TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, but on a corporate level. But she says the same thing, and we see it in the corporate level, that we all want connection, but we're all pretending that we're perfect to get that connection, when actually it's authenticity and vulnerability that is the foundation of connection. It's kind of the same here, what we're talking about, that as companies, we feel like we need to sort of portray this perfect fairy tale of who we are to connect with potential people to join our team, when actually, if we are just authentic, first of all, like you're saying, we'll attract those right
ones.
But also then when people join, they don't get a shock and they say, hey, this is not what I signed up for. You end up spending 3 months, 6 months training them, and then they leave because this is not the story that they were sold.
Completely. There's so much about that psychological contract, right? That if you are portraying something out there and you are making that contract, and then people come in and it's completely different, you have lost that person. Even if the person is still with you from a performance perspective, you have lost that person. Not to mention what that person is saying within their inner circle. And in Malta, word of mouth counts.
Yeah, it really does.
It does, because the first thing when we see a job vacancy is not the video. It is, who do I know that works there? Let me ask them how it is. So this idea of putting a lot of effort on our external appearance will fail us unless the external appearance truly matches what it's really like to be there. I feel so strongly about this, because even this, just to go back on your point of kind of feeling that we need to keep up the appearances, I've worked with so many genuine owners who are feeling like they need to do what everyone else is doing because their employees keep asking for that sameness. So they are at a loss. It's like they are good people, they're good owners with sizable companies. But it's like there's so much noise out there to do this.
What kind of sameness are you talking about here?
From little things to more events to, a lot of flexible working, to giving out, free gym memberships. So much of this, like we want. And the more you give, the more you're diluting who you are.
If what you're giving is not in line with your values.
Exactly.
It definitely takes a lot of courage, I think, to lead from the inside out. I mean, you know me, this is like my life philosophy, and I had this even before joining Shireburn at Sanya. The whole philosophy was build your life from the inside out, find that peace and your values as a human being within. But I do feel like society has also so conditioned us, especially in a small island where there's a lot of expectation and social pressure to conform or to look like everyone else. It takes a lot of courage from leaders to say, actually, hold on, I'm just going to be myself. And I even remember when I first took the job at Shireburn, I'm not a person that dresses excessively smart. I don't wear a lot of makeup. And in the beginning, I really had that choice of like, okay, should I conform to what a CEO typically looks like in Malta and wear and put on makeup and wear earrings? And I remember I did it one day.
I love this.
At the end of the day, I was like, no, this is not me. Like, I just can't do it. I need to wear what I'm comfortable.
It's just not sustainable. That's the bottom line, I would say.
But it does take courage because you are taking a risk. Because I went there on the second day dressed in my clothes that I feel comfortable. And I did risk people not taking me seriously or not saying, what kind of CEO is this?
Yeah.
And it does take courage, I think,
to lead. It takes courage, but I also suspect that if you don't have a deep understanding of who you are, whether you're a person or a company, then it's
harder.
It's much harder. Yeah. Right? Then there's no chance.
So how do we do this work? Because now we're going to a whole different territory where we need to prepare ourselves as individuals, as companies, to live the brand and live our values.
Yes. Well, first you need to define it, right? You need to have a piece of paper beyond your logo, right? Because that's, so far, I think locally, we all tend to have our book with the logo, with the colors, with the codes, and then how the logo needs to be positioned, right? Till that point we get to.
Yeah.
But what that means, who are we, what is our culture, that kind of book written.
And how do we live it? Like, what's the guideline
exactly,
for living
it? Doesn't exist. Because the answer that we get is, we've been together for 30 years. We all know. And then I go ask them the values and or the purpose, and they don't know. And these are people who have been with the senior leader or the owner for 30 years.
Yeah.
So how do we do it? So first of all, we need to define it. Now, whether you're going to have values or you're not, you still need to define who we are, right? Then there are a couple of other steps that you need to, let's say, take. I would say the very, very first step is to understand your performance setup. Like, what is your approach to performance? Because if your approach to performance is just what have you achieved, then you will never reinforce these values and these behaviors, right? Because you are telling someone, we are only interested not in how you behave or how you've achieved your goals, but that you've achieved them or not. So that is step one, right? Now, whether you have a formal setup for this or whether you say once a month you're meeting your direct report, say it's a very small company, right? You can still talk about how things are achieved. Number two is your communications. Conversations tend to be operational. Have you achieved this? Have you done this? What are the challenges with this? Why haven't you done this yet? We need more people. Very operational. So the second part will be in each interaction that I have, okay, whether that's a one-to-one or whether that is a company-wide communication. How am I linking what I am saying to either the bigger picture of who we are or to a value? Right? So if I'm introducing a new system, okay, whether that's for commercial purposes, for HR purposes, doesn't matter. How is this linked? Like, clearly I made I'm getting this new system. There's a reason behind it. Yeah. How is this linked to who we are as an organization, to where we're going? So say this, right? So these are already two very, I wouldn't say easy, but clear steps. And when I talk about communication, I'm talking both the internal communication and everything that you're saying out there. Number three, your events or any, let's say, employee fun activity. I have a very strong view about this. Employees do not need the organization to have fun. Employees need the organization to help them be the best they can possibly be in their roles, right? As humans, right? That they feel they are in a role that brings the best out of them. So, having an event just for the sake of fun is not maximizing either this, nor is it supporting you in creating brand ambassadors, because it's saying nothing about your organization. So ideally, any activity or event that you have is, again, somehow linked to either where you're going. So if, for example, you're, I don't know, a tech company, obviously innovation and all these things are super important. So if you had an event around this theme, right, wouldn't it make a big difference than people just gathering around in their best outfit and standing and drinking and probably speaking just to their team because that's who they feel comfortable with? Right? So you are using a lot of money, spending a lot of money, but not maximizing it in relation to who you are as an organization. So these are just three examples. I don't know how it sounds.
No, I mean, it sounds perfect. And in fact, we've actually done a lot of this at Shireburn. And in fact, I wanted to get to that part about performance review. But a point on these team events, because I super resonate with this message, and it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine as well. But I feel like as organizations, we so don't know what truly creates connection. That's sort of our best option is fun.
Yes.
And in a way, I see even with our team, like sometimes they do enjoy just having fun with their team and their colleagues, and that's fine too. But I think there needs to be both, space for both. And there are some people with organizations that is sort of where they're at in the kind of connection that they're ready for. But I think as an organization, we super right that we need to have a bigger vision and realize that actually human connection and growth and development, there are specific conditions that can be created for that don't fit into that mode. Okay, let's meet up, let's have a drink, let's do a team building, let's do an escape room or whatever it may be.
There is a place for that, but also employees have the ability to take care of that for themselves, right? Because if you've created that space where they're meeting each other because the topic is not them, but something related to the company, then you've created a connection which doesn't kind of force them to make friends.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're putting them in a social setting, you are forcing fun.
Yeah.
And that's a horrible feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like at a wedding when the music goes on and you're expected to dance, but you really don't feel like it's horrible.
Yeah.
Right? But so what you want to create is a safe space for that connection, for a person. It comes down to a person speaking to someone who's not in their team.
Yeah.
How can we make that happen?
Yeah.
Right? How can we make it at lunch, for example? It is so hard for someone to go and sit next to someone that's not in their team. So hard. Can we create a little bit of a Q&A card on the canteen table for people to ask each other? Can we create a little bit of a habit around this?
Curating connections and conversations that are related to the work in a way that is authentic and not too forced.
Simple.
Yeah.
Do we need to go to a day to Sicily to do this? No.
Yeah.
Right? People are not going to join an organization because of fun.
Yeah.
People are going to join an organization because they feel they're contributing to their job. The company is fair. They have their basic needs met. Right? It's not because of fun.
Yeah.
It's not that simple.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agreed. I think we have a lot of scope to be a lot more conscious and curate a lot better the team building, as we so call them, events.
Yeah.
I love that.
This is why I call my approach to employer branding the employer brand mindset.
Yeah.
Because it's not budget.
Yeah.
It's taking what you do already and tweaking it so slightly.
Yeah. Making it more purposeful in a sense and more matched to the aim of the organization and where it wants to go.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. I'd love to talk a bit more about the performance management because this has been something that we've worked on a lot over this last year. And this was actually the exercise that we did where we chose essentially our values based on this sort of exploration with all the stakeholders. And we integrated it into our performance review. So our performance review system is based on some technical questions and then questions around values. And we're actually closing up our cycle in the next couple of days. And it's going to be, I'm really curious to see as well the results of this, because obviously as we were going through this exercise, for me, it really matters to see how my leaders, especially my senior leaders, are doing on the values-based questions, because that shows me, do I have leaders in the right positions? And it's also a really beautiful way to see the potential in people that have maybe only just joined the company, but are really matching and role modeling our values. And I'm really looking forward to those unexpected surprises of the people that are really modeling those values for us.
Yeah. Completely. I mean, I think we all know that in some instances, skill can be taught.
Yeah.
But attitude not always.
Yeah.
And this is what we're talking about here. We've all been part of a community that we feel so connected to, right? Because we speak the same language without speaking the same language.
Yeah.
And it's hard. You see, I really think about this because I've seen it in some organizations that I've worked for, even as an employee, I mean, not only, you know, as a consultant. This work, for example, that you are doing will pay off because people will feel closer to each other. But if there's no system like the performance to reinforce it,
Yeah.
it will be lost.
Yeah.
This is why performance is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really beautiful, actually, even just getting people to reflect on these values. And since this was the first time, I really asked all the employees to reach out to me if they personally, if they had any clarity or they were grappling with a specific question. I actually got reached out to by various people across the organization, asking me, okay, actually, I'm trying to answer this question on humility. And the way I see humility is like this, and the way it's defined like this. And we had these really beautiful conversations around our values as we were sort of grappling with them. And it really brings them to life, which is really beautiful.
Yes. I do an exercise with the companies that I usually work with, where we have a workshop where employees need to take some time to read the description of the value that in an ideal world would have come up through their work, but it's not always the case. And then the question, the exercise is simply, how do I live this value in a simple action daily? And this could be as simple as switching off the lights, right?
Yeah.
But unless we give employees a minute to think of this, they can never live the values.
Yeah.
Right? So if we emailed them the values and they read it, that's not a learning experience.
Yeah.
Right? So things like these workshops, things like the performance. So we can't go from having the values on the wall to performance, ideally. Ideally, there's something in between that helps them socialize and think, right? Because even leaders, we can't like assume because they're a leader that they know.
Yeah.
Right? So we need to give them this mental space to make, like exactly what you are saying, right? In relation to performance and maybe after, before, you know, kind of. Now imagine what you're doing with performance plus the constant internal communications reminder.
Yeah.
Imagine the power of that every time you spoke to your team, you linked it to a value.
Yeah.
Now, it's not going to happen in a month, not in 2 months, but over 6 months, a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think this is where the sort of leadership coaching is really important, because obviously these values are only as real as your managers are living them and embodying them. Because even if you do all of this and then there's a line manager who is not living these values, then that is something that I feel very passionate about, because I feel like to be our best selves at work, we have to, I mean, most of the values are always soft skills. They're always, like you said, integrity, responsibility, teamwork. So these are not technical skills. These are skills that are useful in our relationships, as parents, as citizens. Like, these are just things that we need to develop to round our personality and be better human beings, regardless of where we work.
Yes.
And I feel like this is something new that is coming into companies. But again, there's a lot more scope for us to really be more intentional about the way that we support our leaders to model this. And I had some really interesting experiences over these years, because this is something I took very seriously with my senior management team. That one of the first things I did was training on a set of values that I felt were very important. And we did, I think it was 10 weeks, where we met every week and we went into examples, we had debates, we had senior leaders bringing up specific situations, and
This
us
is
having
it. You need to
really-
give them the space
Yeah.
to assimilate.
Yeah, we had really heated discussions around this. And I remember that there were a couple of instances where some of my senior leaders really made grave mistakes in the way that they were role modeling these values. And I remember I really came to a choice point as a leader where I could say, okay, this person is not living up to the values. I'm either going to demote them from leadership, or going to fire them, or no longer have them in the organization. And I'm very much a person that believes in training, especially on the value side, because I believe in our innate goodness. So I feel like whenever we can't live up to a value, it's not because we don't want to, but because we had some past experiences, or we're trying to protect ourselves, or we just don't feel safe enough to model a value. And I really put extra care into support, like calling out the behavior and saying, okay, this is not, but I believe that you want to sort of uphold this value, and I'm going to support you to get there. And funnily enough, these two leaders have actually gone on to be some of the brightest lights in the organization, because they had sometimes, almost when things go wrong, it gives you the opportunity to really heal and to really go into, okay, why are we going wrong, and how can we learn from the experience? And it really touched me, and I always remember these stories, because when I look at their contributions to the organization since these incidents, it's...
You've hit upon really two key points here. Having a set of values allows you to call out behaviors that are not in line with something. So it actually helps you with managing performance, if we want to use this term, not a term I'm keen on, right? It helps a junior manager up to the most senior manager to say, hang on a second, the way you did that there was not in line, so it's a tool, right? The second part is about coaching. Thank God, coaching has become much more widespread now. But how often is the company paying for an external coach for their team without any direction? Right? So that, again, is this is similar to the Christmas party that you're spending thousands on and not maximizing it. If you are an organization that is investing, in your case, you took an active role in this, right? But say you are not that kind of leader, you don't
or
have
you're
that,
a bigger organization where there are more layers.
Exactly, right? Have your external coach understand what your values are, that you want this leadership team that are coming to you to really be able to, and to your point, it doesn't mean that they naturally have these values, or for whatever reasons, right? It's lost money.
And I think underpinning it needs to be this real belief in people that with support and with coaching,
they can get
there. I mean, there are always going to be exceptions of people who are not ready to grow at the rate that you might need them to. And they also have a right to grow at their own pace. I very much believe in that. Maybe that's outside of your organization if it doesn't fit your requirements. But I think having that optimistic approach to what people are capable of and what they can contribute, and knowing that ultimately it's going to make them happier, because no one wants to come to work and not have a positive impact. But sometimes we get stuck in behaviors that actually are self-sabotaging and we don't know the way out of them.
But there's a flip side also, to this. You are also giving that person an opportunity to make a decision. Right? Because the truth is that if you don't match, if you really cannot get yourself to be in line with the values on that continuum that we spoke about, right? It's not 10 out of 10 on all the values. That this is just not the place for you. And you will always be unhappy because you're not living your authentic self. So yes, organizations have a responsibility, but so does the individual. Right? And this is why the younger generation are really causing chaos because they are thinking, is this the organization for me? Whereas these leaders that I'm working with of the 20, 30 years can't even fathom moving.
Yeah, in fact, the younger generations get a bit of a bad rap sometimes. Me and Michaela speak about this a lot, that sort of leaders complain, oh, these young people, they can't stick a job but at the same time, they are kind of like the immune system, I feel, telling us like, hey, there's something wrong in our organizations because there should be no reason why we can't go to work, get basic needs met, and also grow, find our job rewarding, find our work interesting.
There's a lot of, what I see is there's a lot of comfort, right? As long as, especially perhaps in the, let me not put a size to it or anything, but there is comfort. As long as the balance sheet is looking okay, and we are, as owners, also quite comfortable, then that it stops there. We actually, ironically, are not ambitious to say, actually, my balance sheet, if I go through, could be even better. Right? And it's another missed opportunity.
Yeah, I think luckily this is changing and we are starting to realize that, hey, I think Simon Sinek has done a big service to the corporate mindset in general by really sort of bringing these ideas into the mainstream. And it makes me very hopeful for the future of what organizations can be. And the contribution we can have ultimately to the wider community.
And this is it, organizations play a big part, and this is sometimes what also employees don't understand. They just see kind of from their perspective, but it's also because I think there is a big lack of internal communications. And not, when I talk about internal communications, I'm not talking about being good at communicating with your team or one-to-one. So if we're not explaining to employees, it's obvious that their vision is going to be very tiny and that their conversation is just going to be about the task. So then we can't blame them that they're not engaged.
Or that they're not also compassionate for the struggles of the organization, because it's also not easy to run a functional organization.
Yes, but that you have a company and that you speak to your team, or I mean, when I say team, the whole organization, twice a year, it's not enough. These are consumers. They're just internal consumers. They're not going to remember the values because you mentioned them twice. You need to be talking constantly and not through one channel, not just through a town hall or just through the Christmas email. You need to have multiple because people take in information differently and people are at different points in their life. So if you really want to create this culture, this common leadership culture, this brand ambassadors, your communications machine needs to be oiled. Like super well.
And it needs to be consistent because obviously, I mean, talk is cheap, like anyone can say, we believe this, but then I love the expression when the rubber hits the road. Like, how is your organization actually living up to the values and communicating?
Overall, where you're going, because and then in the tougher times, then it's okay. We need to think like of a family. I'm going to be really stereotypical here. It's not your kind. But if you have, the father, for example, who's always going out to work and managing the finances. And then suddenly one day he comes and say, actually, we're really struggling. Isn't the family going to be lost? And that's what happens sometimes with organizations. We catch employees by shock. We're not taking them on the journey with us. We're expecting them to pivot with us, but not giving them enough like rope to be with us.
Time to digest, right?
This is it.
I have to say that I found that when you explain things to the team, I like to communicate. I think it's one of my strong points. And And obviously being a non-technical person in a technical company, thank God I have some soft skills that I can bring to the table. But I really like to communicate the team why decisions have been taken and where we're going. And most people are so reasonable. They really get it. They understand it. And ultimately, if they're involved in the decisions and they see, actually, there's no other better option than this one right now, I find that people are very supportive to the general direction. But when they're left out of it, it's very easy to be hypercritical and say, oh, the organization's always going wrong, oh, this, oh, that, because they're just isolated from
you
the
need
decision.
to give a why, right? And sometimes that why is simply because this is our value.
Yeah.
See how nice it is to have this value, right? Such a tool, such a tool all the time.
Yeah.
You know, so even if there's a deep business decision that sometimes, let's face it, can't be shared.
Yeah.
There are some things that can't be shared. We're not a village here.
Yeah.
We're a business.
Yeah.
But as long as you can help people make sense of this decision, to your point, they will come with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I think that's a great point to end this conversation. Van, thank you so much for being here. And I feel like I learned through this conversation as well. And
thanks.
Yeah, I feel like there were a lot of things in here that really add to our mission to create happier and efficient workplaces. So I hope some of our listeners implement some of what you're sharing. And I know you're going to be joining us and doing some trainings and some collaborations together. So I really look forward to having your expertise, because I really believe in culture change. I feel like we have a lot of good to do in the corporate world. So I'm excited about it.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Any final thoughts? Or?
No, maybe the audience should send in some of the things that maybe they've tried to implement.
Yeah.
This would be quite nice.
Yeah, that would be great to hear, even just challenges and, where these kind of ideas meet the most resistance within your organizations, because hopefully we'll do future podcasts and we'll be able to address some of those. So let us know your thoughts, and please share if you have any friends who would resonate with the topics. Thanks again, Van, and see everyone soon.